If I can ask Senator Mike Nicholas if he can lead us in prayer.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, all things are possible to you. Take this cup from us, but grant us, Lord, not what we will, but what you do. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you. Senator Mike Limchako, if you can lead us in the recitation of Inefresi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Inefresi, gini mastakilu gihena soku, imastakulum gi corazonho, zani masfigo na niña sinyahu, ofrecen maisazu, parabayu defendi, inengi i cultura, i lenguaje, i airi, i hanum zanitano tomorrow. Niren shoku derecho girnezu ostata, esti hu afitma gihila u biblia, zani benerahu i benderanguahu.
Thank you. And would Senator Morrison lead us in the singing of the Guam hymn, and Senator Frank Hogan to lead us in the national anthem.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Panogita moru, purita nota, cantai matunanya litorura. Para iora, para gloria, aviva isla sempara. Para iora, para gloria, aviva isla sempara. Odui tempui pas parahita, zangini langit na bendition. Contrai peligro, na fans of fuhar, Zeus proteis land one. Contrai peligro, na fans of fuhar, Zeus proteis land one. Oh, can you see by the dawn's early light was so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight for the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets went where the bombs bursting in air came through to the night, that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you. The clerks, please take roll call.
Senator Tom Adda. Senator Tony Adda. Senator Uggan. Vice Speaker Cruz. Senator Duenas. Senator Lim Tiaco. Senator McCready. Senator Morrison. Senator Tina Rose Munya Barnes. Senator Pangilinan. Senator Respicio. Senator Rodriguez. Senator St. Nicholas. Speaker Wampat.
Yeah.
Senator Yamashita. Madam Speaker, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Majority Leader, Senator Respicio, you recognize.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move that Senator Barnes be excused from session.
Without any objections, ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move that the Legislative Journal dated February 11, 2013, as well as February 18, 2013, be approved, subject to correction.
On the motion, without any objections, ordered.
Madam Speaker, there are communications and petitions, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
Hearing no objections, ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There are also messages from Imagalayan Guahan, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
Hearing no objections, ordered.
Madam Speaker, there are reports of standing committees, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
No objections, ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There are no reports of select committees, and so on item 12, Madam Speaker, I move that Bill number 45-32LS to Bill number 52-32LS be given its first reading,
No objections, ordered.
as well as Bill 53-32COR to Bill numbers 71-32COR also be given its first reading,
No objections, ordered.
and that Resolution number 41-32LS to Resolution number 56-32LS also be given its first reading,
No objections, ordered.
and Resolution 57-32COR to Resolution numbers 83-32COR also be given its first reading.
No objections, ordered.
Madam Speaker, my first motion is any resolution of commendatory or condolence in nature that's introduced for the duration of this session, that it be adopted, that all senators be co-sponsors, and that the sponsors of these documents work closely with the clerk and the legal counsel in its preparation, that be automatically adopted, approved, and transmitted by you.
Hearing no objections, ordered.
In my other motion, Madam Speaker, it's kind of customary that you see many bills and resolution on the second reading file. If in the likely event we get to a bill and the sponsor either needs more time or some additional information is pending, that bill or resolution be set aside, not passed on file, but set aside, and that as soon as the sponsor of these bills or resolutions are ready for this body to deliberate on those matters, that they inform you, and then you would be able to expedite the process in this manner.
Hearing no objections, ordered.
And then I understand, Madam Speaker, at this time there would be an override attempt, so I would ask that we have the sponsor of that bill, vetoed bill number 9-32, make the presentation at this time.
Speaker Pangilinan, you're recognized on the motion. Okay, so
Okay, we just take a minute recess to get a copy of the veto message.
we'll take a brief recess. The legislature is back in session. Speaker Pangilinan, you recognize on a motion for vetoed bill.
Thank you, and Sujusmasi, Madam Speaker. Buenas dan hafaday, todos imangagi pa ako na manekungog dan imangagi wini halum. Maila data baba esti I dota session gini no gifinut sa moro sa tabia manggagagayad giya halum mes sa moro. Madam Speaker, dahil na buyo muebi zo ma pega I prenoponi numero 9-32, an act to add a new section 58148, 58148.1.2.3, and section 8149 to chapter 58 of Title 12, Guam Code Annotated, and amend sections of chapter 58 of Title 12, Guam Code Annotated, relative to establishing the Qualifying Certificate Review Board, the Qualifying Certificate Accountability and Transparency website, and for other purpose, ni nega ni magalahi gi aksyon niya ni mga agang abito. Guatu gi sagan agenda di maalo ki voting file put ko sinya ta considera that nega ni neganya magalahi. So for the purpose of an override, I move that Bill 9-32 be placed in the voting file. And I'd like to speak on that motion.
Yeah, you may proceed.
Sidusmasi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill number 9-32 is an act to add greater transparency to the review process of the Qualifying Certificate Program. The process would, in effect, pretty much allow the same process that currently occurs under the GIDA Board of Directors. The difference, Madam Chair, is that the process will now have a new board that will review this from a different perspective. I agree with the governor that the process seems to be of the same, look at some of the same information that would be looked at by the GIDA Board of Directors. The difference is who's looking at that piece of information and from what perspective they're looking at that information. And the difference is that this additional layer of review, in my opinion, adds greater transparency to the process, which we see is lacking with a review just by the GIDA Board of Directors and the Governor of Guam in making that decision. It is not enough. The people of Guam, the business community of Guam, the legislature even, does not have the same kind of access to that information. We kind of pride ourselves as members of this legislature of doing our job and staying on top of issues so critical as granting of tax breaks and tax abatements as it affects the treasury of the government of Guam and our ability to support the services given by our agencies from the revenues we collect. We pride ourselves that we work hard, that we try to keep in touch. But how many of us, just ask yourself, if this current process, which the governor says is sufficient, if this current process is sufficient for us to do our job, for the people of Guam to know what's happening with the abatement and the e-payment, with giving away of public resources, if the business community, who is supposed to be paying attention to these things because it affects their business activities, if they don't know what's happening, how much more for the average person on Guam? And the governor says it's sufficient, so we don't have to do anything. But all of us, ask ourselves, did we know prior to this bill being discussed, did we know, for example, that we have a qualifying certificate being applied for by a medical facility? Did we know that we have a qualifying certificate being applied for by a business that's already open and operating and functioning down in Tumon Bay? Did we know that a qualifying certificate that promised to employ 93 people was modified and changed to reflect only 11 people as the new employment level when we gave away tax breaks based on 93, creating 93 new jobs? Did we know that that was modified? Did we know, for example, that we have a company that's currently not operating, wanting to do an additional activity and is applying for a tax rebate? Do we know these things? Under the current process, that's the process that the governor says is sufficient. I must say, Madam Speaker, that most of us didn't. And most of the members of the community didn't know. So what we're trying to do is add another layer, Madam Speaker, and that layer is a review process through an additional qualifying certificate review board from the government's perspective, so that this review board, comprised of professionals within the government of Guam, will look at it from what is the effect of these qualifying certificate abatements and rebatements on the resources available to the government of Guam to meet our obligations to the community in providing services. How does it affect when we change employment levels from 93 to 11? How does that affect us in terms of the income taxes that we would collect and the difference in that? Yet it was approved. Did we know that there are qualifying certificates that are automatically renewed? Not even a review process. As long as they file their reports and they expire, they're automatically renewed. Is that the type of transparency that we have that doesn't even tell us these things when those modifications are made? That's why, Madam Speaker, I think we need to open up the review process, have another set of different eyes from a different perspective, review these qualifying certificates. These are the people's money. These are taxes from the operations of businesses in our community that would be collected if not for the granting of a qualifying certificate. And so far, Madam Speaker, it's not sufficient. It's not transparent. The information doesn't flow to the general public, much less, Madam Speaker, are other members of our community whose businesses are affected by this. I think everyone should know when this is happening, and we know from the emails we've received, from the different forums that we've had, just that have been generated by the discussion of this, as well as the new applications, know that it's not sufficient, Madam Speaker. And so this would allow this other set of professionals within the government of Guam to look at it from that. Madam Speaker, the governor says it's enough. I say it's not enough. I say we need a new set, and we need to kind of maybe slow down the process. Of course it will slow it down, but there's no need to rush into giving away the public's tax dollars, Madam Speaker. There's no need to rush into doing that. And if the governor says we're not doing it fast enough, I say we're doing it too fast without every member of our community having the opportunity to review this, to comment on it. I say that it's too fast when members of our business communities whose business operations are going to be affected by the granting of QCs in the same industry, I say it's too fast when these people don't know. And it's not enough when these people don't know and don't have the opportunity to present their perspective on how it will affect them, Madam Speaker. And so that's why, Madam Speaker, I believe that this bill is necessary, it's good public policy, and it's for the protection of the public resources and the public tax dollars rather than giving them away, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the governor also mentions about how this bill affects confidentiality. Madam Speaker, there are enough protections in the bill that ensures that the businesses who submit their applications will have their confidential and their trade secrets protected during that whole process, Madam Speaker. I think the governor may be reaching for an excuse to veto the bill by citing that it's going to compromise confidentiality. Madam Speaker, other jurisdictions publish these type of informations on the tax abatements and the rebates. Other jurisdictions, under the same Constitution of the United States that we operate and we have to follow, publish information which the governor says are confidential. I believe that we have enough protections in the open government law, in the FOIA, in terms of what is public document and what is not public document, that safeguards the application and the information submitted in these applications to ensure that we don't violate business trade secrets and so forth during the process of reviewing this information and publishing them on the transparency website. The transparency website is going to allow members of our community to take a look at what's happening in the QC. It's going to take a look and put forth who's complying and who's not complying. Why should that be a secret on who's complying? And they're saying we can't put that on the website because it's confidential. Why is it that those who do not meet their obligations when they are given public dollars and they don't conform to the conditions and the terms that are outlined when they get those dollars and they get to keep those public dollars, why should that be confidential, Madam Speaker? We publish the police blotter, we publish the court convictions, and those are adjudicated. Why is it that when GIDA does a review process and these people don't comply, why should it be confidential? Why should it threaten the viability of these businesses? We need to know who's complying with the rules and regulations of this government. The people and the public deserve that, Madam Speaker. And so, Madam Speaker, once again, Madam Speaker, I'm asking for the consideration of my colleagues. I thank them for the support the last time, Madam Speaker, which yielded 12 votes on this bill. And I ask for the continued consideration and support and the reconsideration by those that may not have initially supported this in terms of, given what we've seen happen, given the new reports that we've had published that some of us may not have been aware of. And I think it's really necessary, Madam Speaker, as a matter of public policy, to open this process up, to shine the light of public scrutiny on this, and ensure that the public knows when we are giving away public dollars to support investment on Guam, and what are we getting in return, Madam Speaker? I think that the public needs to know, and the public should have that opportunity. And that is why in the process we've outlined, we've asked for public hearings. We've asked for hearings in the villages on this thing, Madam Speaker, so that people know, so that people have an opportunity to express their opinion, so people can make suggestions. You know, Madam Speaker, a lot of us here, we see bills come on the floor. A lot of these bills that we have, the same as me and I'm sure as the rest, are from concerns brought to us by our constituents. And so we need to ensure that the concerns we have over the qualifying certificate and how it gives away tax dollars are presented to the people, and that these people have an opportunity to voice their concerns to us, which may yield additional changes to the bill, but also so that it checks and provides some checks and balance, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, malad at tasangan hafasti ginagago ini proponin 9-32 ni Avito y Goberno. Tagagago wini na bill na para tababa isti qualifying certificate na programa. Aji sinyomatan hafa po fa magkonsidera da umatungo ni tauto dan todo i business dan i komersyante gwini sa Guam hafa ginagaw esti po fan moto do fan mambaba business giza Guam kwanto na sa lapi publiko para tanai ni maalo keji tax abatement and tax rebatement haji poromanai kwanto poromanai haji otro na komersyante gwini gi komunidad parewa business niya lo timanan na EQC. Za hafa tayo mano po inafekta edzo. Sa tatunga na anun sa poti ST business niyo nai tati ni zonya tax put para unahalom tati za u reinvest tati gi business niya pero ni nalala i business inafekta siyempre di timanan na EQC. Po siyempre tatunga na edi timana EQC nisisita una siguro na uapasi tax niya. Imanai QC, tiyan nisisita mapasi tax niya sa manai rebate. Dako bali ano, dako balansi ano. Ko nahong para tatsuli tati ginini invest na sa lapi para publiko pero sinapotay serbisyo ni gobyerno pat ko tapuno da tahonyo este otro ni atsuli i oportunidad da invest sa lapi niya da taza ni nana ini gobyerno tati. Nisisita ta na balansi, nisisita ta na tungo isti siya na tautawis, tayo mano, ko bali dyan dinansi ano, Enigi siya na konsiderasyon nisisita tababa sa matungo sa sa lelenya gobyerno na estay no soldo matungo lo haji siya tumungo. Haji tumungo giujong. Nagwahan manai QC za promete gobyerno no para emplea 93 na tauto. Za ani manai ni QC mapus halum za manggago dispensasyon na kula na mo lang niya kadua ay 93 put para beutulay QC malafan da betulay ka za onsya na tauto be emplea za ani atulay ka distignan 93 sa tay onsi ko matulay kay abatement hi parewa haji tumungay no na tayo no malofanyas tin na QC zelengya gibenusta nahunga informasyon nahungi tay mano ta tsotsogi parenting ko todo no na informasyon lo haji tumungay no na informasyon siya ha iman manai dan siya ha manai timatungo iti tauto ni otro siya na business ni parewa business niya kumagan na matulay ka pa ogo in manin affectas ti siya na tautogwis haji tumungo na parafa no preba ko taigwini na automatica por man renew como file is on report automatic ma renew tisinya taatan ko magahit na edji prometi tawam na para taigwini ko po podong ipresyo di sa tiyo napapasi tax za un pegay jo tatigi business mo za tiyo nisita umado por un pegay gi business mo un sulia edji kwanto na tax ni por un papasi gobyerno za manayo za para niribaha kwanto gasto mo por un operate mo business za manay tati itauto pero reduce presyo gi hafa pon na serbisyo para hafa na produkto pon na itauto Guam titatungo ino siya tada no ni anok posedo na Madam Speaker na leleko tanisisita otro na talanga otro sinya umungok otro na mata otro na naso otro na preciso igida angin man manay QC todo tempo matcharge eji man manay QC para siha para kinibri i operasyon niya pos manggay interes sigida no fan manay QC sa ginin eno ni man susuli sa lapit po apasi sweldo niya ang taza QC nisisita buwenti ribahay sweldo niya sa tinahong sa lapit niya para niya operation lo intri mas QC man manay mas megay na sweldo sinya hot size sweldo niya mas sinya man paseo para New York pad Monogwato pa Vietnam aji mo mo mapasis ti inano para Vietnam ginigit estia ini cuesta mati gobyerno haji mapasi edzo i gaston i pofanhano itauto i gobyerno zani tropanya gwato Vietnam gida zani GVB ginin mano iti sa lapi gida na suli pati jo ginin ni QC monitoring fees maalo iti gina nalileko ano natan na izo pos hafa interest niya gida na pofanay QC pero sinyo matsuli monitoring fees daw mausan pofanpaseo enigin na nalileko nisisita gwa otro natan ni QC za parafagwe sa tiu mapasiyan po paseo. O kaatan ko dinansis ti para gobyerno ko nahong ang tanoi dyan no abatement and rebatement interest niya dyan kwanto invest giza Guam za ko nahong na mas na kumensyante na activity dyan mas tax pero halum ki kwanto tanan na itati. Et sige nisisita ta gagagaw nay no pero maatan sa eno ginasoko nay no hunggan maatan eno lo gahigi agitati ginason niya na lani an maunais tin na QC 100,000 doko monitoring fee sinya mun tinahong para be maswed outside swed doko otro sakan ang gintiunay lani sinya maribaha enigi siya na klase ni naso nay nisisita ta templa di ni para STE otro na review process. Ni otro po inatan, ni aatan lang niya, lani anu nais ti tati ni abatement and rebate of $3 million, anu nai tati, kwanto na nuevo na tax, gi otro siya na aktibidad, ginin izonya investment, ko babel collect 5 million. But okuka bay collect na 1 million na. Ja, mula nga bunti an ukuleka i 3 ki 1 ha. Sa tinahong na tibu malansi. Pos esti siya inuebo na qualifying certificate review board enigi siya po maatan. Ginini interesi publiko do manay balansi i kwanto para tanay tati. Dan kwanto para ta suli ja tagosa lokwe para ta usa para ta sapoti i operasyon ni gobyerno para tanay serbisyo publiko. Enigi Madam Speaker, ginagagaw ni esti na legislatura. Iti ginaleko precisus ti. Leko na maulik esti na polisiyan publiko para ta pega halong gilaita ta na siguro na ubalansi esti na sistema dididi sa pago na tempo ti balansi. Talia afa man malofan, talia odisya linya hafay no tay manu na tay wenno. Hafa tay manu no na tumay wenno. Sa hafa, sa titatungo. Sa timan masangonit, sa tinahong transparency. Tinahong binabamputta. Tinahong na hinaso para hafa po makonsidera, dan haji po makonsidera, mientras man desisyon, man spipia po fan mamatinas desisyon, haji pro manoi. Kwanto pro manoi, dan kwanto para ta resibitati. Ejigi, leleko na maulik esti u gagago, Madam Speaker, ti parabel Peña Hodzi parabel no favor Hodzi i publiko po finabot ni esti para na siguro na mas dipago ang gin mapasas ti gi override mas kipago mas informasyon tanay tauto mas siya na informasyon para man matitinas desisyon guaha pero makonsidera the mas balansi. Madam Speaker. Pues Madam Speaker, Bilgago, da por favor, hasu fantalo, da ang ginsinya, ugagago, para ipubliko, para itautaw Guam, para i-gobyerno ng Guam, da tanahalom esti, tanafalofan esti, da pwede sinya mas, maulik esti qualifying certificate program, da siguro na asetbi itautaw Guam, todo, ti edra i matungo hafagwa. Da ti edra po fansinidbi, iman manai, da iman mananai. Let this public policy and the override of Bill 9 pass, Madam Speaker, so that the qualifying certificate program truly benefits the people of Guam, that the considerations taken into the granting of this ensures that that is taken into consideration, and that the qualifying certificate does not benefit only those that are given certificates and only those that are giving certificates, Madam Speaker, that it truly benefits the public and the public interest in terms of stimulating economic activity on Guam and ensuring that we don't negatively affect the other commercial activities on Guam by ensuring greater transparency and greater review process in this whole matter, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, once again, I ask for all my colleagues' consideration and kind support of this legislation, and I believe it will be an addition, a positive addition to the process. I realize that it may slow down the process a little bit, Madam Speaker, but we set some timelines in here. And Madam Speaker, when it comes to giving away public dollars, there's no need to rush. There's no need to rush. And I don't think that any kind of additional review process that has been granted or is set up in this law is going to provide any kind of undue burden and undue delay, Madam Speaker. I just think it's going to provide greater opportunity for our people, greater opportunity for our local businesses to know what's happening, to see how it affects their activity and their businesses, and for the government of Guam to get that additional perspective in terms of trying to ensure that the investment and the yield on our investment and the return of our investment from the additional economic activity of these investments under the qualifying certificate program is fair and balanced. And it's favorable really to the government of Guam. That's what we want. That's the whole idea behind this, Madam Speaker. It's to make it sure that it's favorable to the government of Guam, which translates into greater revenue for the people of Guam, for us to provide the public services to the degree and the quality that our people deserve. So thank you, Madam Speaker, and Sidus Masi.
Notwithstanding the objection of the governor on vetoed Bill 9-32, is there anyone who would like to speak on it? So on the motion then to send vetoed Bill 9-32 to the voting file without any objections, so ordered. Senator Respicio, you're recognized for legislative concurrence.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we have a few legislative concurrences I'd like to move to the voting file. These are the ones with filed committee reports. Item number 2, from the Committee on Health and Human Services, Health Insurance Reform, Economic Development, and Senior Citizens, on the appointment of Ms. Lauralee T. Crisostomo to serve as Director of the Bureau of Statistics and Plans, with Senator Rodriguez's committee's recommendation to do confirm. I move that that be placed in the voting file.
On that motion, without any objections, so ordered.
From the Committee on Appropriations, Public Debt, Legal Affairs, Retirement, Public Parks, Recreation, Historic Preservation, and Land, on the appointment of Mr. Victor F. Cruz to serve as a member of the Guam Land Use Commission, with Speaker Pangilinan committee's recommendation to do confirm. I move that that be placed in the voting file.
Objections, so ordered.
Then also from Senator Rodriguez's committee, on the appointment of Ms. Marceline Cruz Santos to serve as a member of the Council on Mental Health and Substance Abuse, aka the Advisory Council, with his committee's recommendation to confirm. I move that that be placed in the voting file.
Hearing no objections, ordered.
And then from the Committee on Appropriations, Public Debt, Legal Affairs, Retirement, Public Parks, Recreation, this is Speaker Panglinan's committee, on the appointment of Mr. Pelagio S. Sardoma to serve as a member of the Board of Equalization, with his committee's recommendation to confirm. I move that that be placed in the voting file.
Hearing no objections, so ordered.
And also from Senator Rodriguez's committee, on the appointment of Mr. William E. Stanley II to serve as a member of the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners, with his committee's recommendation to confirm. I move that be placed in the voting file.
Hearing no objections, so ordered.
And Madam Speaker, just a note, we're waiting on the committee reports for items 1 and 7, and once that's filed, I'd ask to be able to move that to the voting file. But that's all that we have under legislative concurrences.
Thank you, Senator. We are now then on the second reading file. And Speaker Pangilinan, you're recognized in Bill number 47-32, Alice.
Thank you, and Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to move that Bill number 47-32, an act to add a new section 8103.1 to Article 1, Chapter 8, Title 4, Guam Code Annotated, to comply with the Internal Revenue Code requirements applicable to the Government of Guam Retirement Fund, be placed in the third reading file. And I'd like to speak briefly on the motion.
Yes, you may proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill number 47-32 is a necessary piece of legislation which is time sensitive to ensure that the Retirement Fund's defined benefit plan complies with what is known as Section 401A of the IRS tax code as to the qualification and the status of the retirement fund, the defined benefit plan. Madam Speaker, this is made necessary due to the deteriorating conditions that occurred in the public pension plans. When we say public pension plans, we probably should say government pension plans, state government pension plans, city, county government pension plans. With the deteriorating conditions that occurred with the crash of the stock market, that was triggered mostly with the 9/11 incident, Madam Speaker, and the effect on that. The pension plans of workers within our country are, of course, broken out into the private pension plans, which are plans operated by the government, by private businesses, and public pension plans or government pension plans, which are operated by state and local governments. The changes to regulatory oversight and terms and conditions of public pension plans were changed, Madam Speaker, to ensure the solvency and the sovereign immunity recognition of these public pension plans and state governments. The sovereign immunity of state governments, of course, ensures that they can act within their state's rights in the establishments of policy, which includes the establishment of pension plans, that are not regulated by the government, by the federal government. So they have an option of how they can structure their pension plans. Now, when the collapse of some of these pension plans was becoming quite a bit more possible, the federal government decided to ensure that the Internal Revenue Code placed some terms and conditions in the operations of these plans, which affected the tax qualification of these plans. They could be tax exempt or non-tax exempt, Madam Speaker, but it still had to be within the choice of the state because of sovereign immunity. And so the states were given the opportunity to opt in or opt out on the tax qualification of their state and local state government pension plans. The government of Guam wants to, and it is in the best interest and benefit of the retirees, to ensure that the retirement fund of the government of Guam is a tax qualified pension plan, which ensures that the contributions made to the retirement fund are pre-tax dollars, so that you're not taxed on your contribution, which enhances the retirement fund's corpus and the individual's contribution. In addition, it also ensures that the interest that the retirement fund gains from its investments is not immediately taxed till after distribution. And so, Madam Speaker, what this does is it recognizes the desire of the government of Guam to continue the defined benefit plan as a tax qualified plan. Now, because the defined benefit plan is set up by statute enacted by this legislative body, any changes to the status of the fund, the requirement to act on the fund and its plan be done by statute versus the action purely upon an adoption of a resolution or a motion by the Retirement Fund Board for the defined benefit plan. When we established the defined contribution plan in 1995, this legislative body gave the authority of amending the plan documents, which sets up the terms and conditions of the operation of the defined contribution plan, to the Board of Trustees. So if they wanted to change eligibility, if they wanted to change vesting, all of that could be done by a change to the plan document under the defined contribution plan. Because the defined benefit plan was done by statutes, things such as opting in to the retirement, to the 401A portion of the Internal Revenue Code, which is the tax qualification status of the state plan, has to be done by statutes. And so we are now amending this. We did receive in 2011, when the ECTRA was first done, which required these government plans to opt in or out, we actually opted in 2011 as a tax qualified plan. We got a certification by the Department of Revenue and Tax that we meet the requirements of 401A, but we did so conditionally. And so what happened is the expiration for the final amendment to the document plan, in this case, to the statute, because the document plan is the statute, that the final day to ensure that the changes are made to the document plan is April of this year, April 3rd of this year. And so what this does is it reaffirms the decision made in 2011 to become a tax qualified plan, and that the changes that are required to be made after that designation, which was granted by the Department of Revenue and Tax in 2011, that the change to the plan document must be finalized by April of this year. And it's April 3rd or 4th, I believe, Madam Speaker. And so what this bill does is it reaffirms that. It ensures that the changes to opting in also required us to accept some language that the federal government required, such as when distributions have to occur on a mandatory basis, so that you have to start making distributions to your pension at a certain age. And so in this case, the federal government, in order to be a tax qualified plan, you have to have a mandatory distribution language. And in this case, we operated that. We've adopted what has been adopted by most states and counties and cities who operate pension plans. We've adopted that to be 70 and a half, or the ladder of when you can retire. And so, Madam Speaker, these are, we ensured that we met with the legal authorities as well as the Department of Revenue and Tax to ensure that what we are doing here does not negatively affect and does not change the retirement benefits of the defined contribution, defined benefit plan members. It does not change what they have earned, what they are vested in, how they will receive their money, how that money will be treated as in terms of its taxability. It reaffirms those, and it changes those and puts them in statutes to protect that. It's also very important because most of our retirees, or we can have a number of a significant number of retirees that retire off island. And so when the distribution is made, Madam Speaker, in terms of their pension, if they are not living on Guam, then they come under the jurisdiction of the IRS. And so they would file the pension earnings that they have with the Internal Revenue Service within the state that they're living in. And so if we did not opt in as a tax qualified plan, we may affect the pensions of those beneficiaries who are living off island, which may subject them to income tax in terms of their distributions, Madam Speaker. And so these are technical changes that we've done. We've reviewed them with the Attorney General's office. We've reviewed them with the Department of Revenue and Taxation, and we are complying with the requirements of 401A of the Internal Revenue Code as is mirrored in Guam, to ensure that we protect the viability of the fund, the tax qualification status, and ensure that we protect the interests to those pensions of our members living off island. So, Madam Speaker, I ask that this body give careful consideration to this, and you will find in your committee report, as you will see in most of the committee reports that are filed by the Committee on Appropriations, that we actually provide verbatim transcripts of the public hearings. So we don't only provide the testimony given, we don't only provide a synopsis or a summary of the proceedings of the hearing, but you actually have in the committee report the verbatim transcripts of what was discussed and what everyone expressed at and was placed on the record on those hearings. So if you have any questions, read the verbatim transcripts, read the submitted testimony and the written testimonies that are submitted, read the questions that are asked by the other senators who were at that hearing and the responses given to those that are providing testimony, and you will have, I believe, a clear and complete picture of the information you need in order to make the decision on this bill. So I ask for your consideration, I ask for your support, and I believe that this is a bill that is necessary in order to ensure that we protect our retirees and we protect their pension and we protect their retirement fund. So this is my statement, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Pangilinan. Any other senator wish to be heard on 47? Any senator wish to be heard on bill number 47? Seeing none. Oh, wait. Two hands. The two Senator Addis, first Senator Tom and then Senator Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, I stand in support of the bill. However, if the author would yield, I have a question regarding how the bill affects the members of the military that go off to perform qualified military service and then come back. I'm just a little concerned that on page 14, lines 1 and 2, we make specific mention that we talk about that they go on duty with any service in the armed forces, Army, Air Force, Navy, the Army National Guard, and the Air National Guard when engaged in active duty. And I'm just concerned that we make specific mention of the National Guard, which is really a reserve component of the Department of Defense structure, but we make no mention about then the reserves. So like you have your Army Reserve and the Air Force Reserve. So I'm just a little bit, I guess, not fully settled that that in the case of, because the people that would actually be affected with this are, for example, members of the Army Reserves who get activated and then come back. But we don't make mention of them. Now, of course, you've got members of the Army National Guard who get activated. So it's very clear, and so there's no, trying to interpret that we mean to also include the reserve components. And so maybe then maybe then an amendment to the effect of any service in the armed forces, Army, to include the reserve components, the Army National Guard and the Air National Guard who are engaged in active duty. So then there's no question that we're also including members of the reserves.
Do you yield, Senator Ben?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the provision for how it affects the pension of those employees are provided for in Section 401A37 of the Federal Code, and it's the Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights of 1994 as amended. And I think that we are also providing that additional language which says that Section 8137.2 also provides certain rights to employees who are on leave without pay and on active duty with the National Guard or the reserve components of the armed services of the United States. So it provides the reserve components of the armed services of the United States, not just the Army. So we're recognizing that under the Uniform Service Employment Reemployment Act, we're just reiterating that for Guam, we have given certain rights to the National Guard and to the reserve components as it relates to the contributions to the retirement fund. So I don't believe that, and this is language, of course, once again, that was vetted by the retirement fund, their legal counsel, and of course the Attorney General of Guam and their legal counsel, who has reviewed this as it relates to the IRS regulations. So
okay, thank you. I think you've adequate, and it was my oversight. I did not see the preceding page that it does make specific mention of reserve components.
thank you.
So you've satisfied my concern. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Tony Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the author would yield just to a question.
Pose your question.
My question is just, if those that are already retired and drawing down a pension, but are under the age of 59 and 1/2 of age, would they be penalized the 10% tax? If they're already retired and drawing their pension?
Do you yield?
Yes. No, the changes here does not change any vested rights that any member of the defined benefit plan has earned. It does not change the treatment of the tax liabilities that they may have. It does not change any penalties that are imposed for early withdrawal, for age requirements. It does not change anything at all with regards as to the current applicability of the benefits of the retirees. So no, it does not.
Does that satisfy your inquiry? Do you have
Yeah.
any further questions?
Just to go a little bit further on that, but does it change anything if we were to opt in with the federal? Does it change on that section, or it still remains the same?
By opting in, we are assuring that nothing changes. By opting in, we opted in, we were given conditional approval as meeting the requirements of being a tax qualified plan, and we made that change and that opting in 2011. By opting in 2011 to be a tax qualified plan, everything remains the same with regards to how the plan is operated, how people are paid, how people are vested, how people get their pension, and the change that needed to occur at that time was that we would also need to change the tax the plan document itself to reflect what is required to be a tax qualified plan under the 2011 Act of ECTRA. And so we did all that. The thing is that we did not make the change to the plan document itself because the plan document is law, it's statute. And so the Department of Revenue and Taxation ruled in 2011 and gave us a qualified letter that we are now a tax qualified plan. And we had to then make the change to the plan document to ensure that those provisions of the IRS code that are mirrored in Guam of what it takes to be a tax qualified plan, that those changes have to be reflected in the plan document. And so we are now making those changes to the plan document by enacting the statutes that we have or the provisions of this bill to ensure that we get final designation as a tax qualified plan. So once again, nothing changes with regards to how the plan is operated, how the people are paid, how their pensions are vested, how their pensions are distributed, the taxability of that pension distribution, et cetera, et cetera. We are just reflecting the changes that are required by the IRS code for what it takes to be a tax qualified plan, which we have already been designated, and the Department of Revenue and Tax has now ruled in the testimony that you'll see that has been submitted, and they just revised their testimony this weekend and submitted it to us, and so you'll see a revised testimony in the committee report that we in fact meet Section 401A requirements of the Internal Revenue Code to qualify as a tax qualified plan, and that we have not changed the retirement plan itself and to the rights and privileges of the members of the defined benefit plan as adopted.
Is that satisfactory, Senator Adams?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any other senators wish to be heard on Bill 47? Any other senator wish to be heard on Bill 47? If not, we'll invite the author to close.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my colleagues for listening and considering this legislation. I believe it is necessary in order to ensure that we comply with the federal requirements of the IRS code for the operations of a tax qualified plan, and that it is in the best interest of our retirees, the plan itself, and the viability of that plan to continue as a tax qualified plan and make those changes necessary in the plan document as reflected in statute to ensure that. And so I ask for your kind consideration. I also ask that maybe at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, before we recess, that we would also vote on this bill and send it up to the governor because of the time-sensitive nature of the bill, and that we give that due consideration to ensure the governor has sufficient time to review the bill.
On the motion to place the bill in the voting file, send the bill down to voting file. There being no objection, so ordered. I'll take a short recess. Senator Tommy Morrison is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have talked to legal counsel and reviewed the comments and worked also with my colleagues to incorporate and address their concerns into Bill 4, and therefore make the motion to accept the bill as substituted by the committee.
On the motion to accept the bill as substituted by the committee, no objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like the motion to accept the bill as substituted by the committee and further substituted on the floor.
Has everybody received a copy of Bill 4 as substituted by the committee on GGO and cultural affairs and further substituted on the floor? It's going around. All right, why don't we do this? I'll accept this, give everybody a chance to read it. Let's go to 5, and you can move, that'll move faster while everybody reads this one.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator Morrison, you're again recognized on Bill number 5.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to place Bill 5-32 as substituted by the Committee on Appropriations, Public Debt, Legal Affairs, Retirement, Public Parks, Recreation, Historic Preservation, and Land in the third reading file.
Does everybody have a copy of 5, or does anybody have a copy of 5? Sergeant at Arms. Senator Yamashita has not received a copy of 5. Well, all right, we'll grab her a copy from mine. All right, Senator Morrison, you may continue. On the motion to place 5 in third reading with discussion, no objection, so ordered. Go ahead, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bill 5 appropriately places the former F.U. Sanchez Elementary School under the jurisdiction of the Thematic Mayor's Office. Given that it has been 4 years since the government has left the historical name and structure to rapidly deteriorate. Mr. Speaker, we must learn from this situation. The closure of one of the rarest and richest historical elementary school in our island that once had a special existence in our time, not just for us, but for our island's children, did not need this treatment. We must be very cautious of what we say and do as government leaders that could contradict our beliefs, especially with our shared thoughts on what preserving our rich history, our rich traditions, and rich culture mean to us. It is obvious that the basis for the closure of the historical school was to supposedly save $1.5 million annually in the DOE budget. However, the recent budget requests and current and previous expenditures by DOE clearly does not reflect these savings. One could also now make the easy argument that money was severely wasted, as $500,000 spent on an evergreen audit report has since only been used to address one recommendation, and that was the closure of the historical F.Q. Sanchez School. Now, do the math, $500,000 to follow one recommendation and still not realize a $1.5 million savings. The question must now ask ourselves, given these facts that we haven't realized these savings, which again was the basis for the closure for the historical school, was closing the historical school and wiping away a rich history, rich traditions, rich culture, displacing students, and devaluing a community overnight, the right thing to do. Mr. Speaker, the right thing to do going forward is to importantly turn over the historical facility to the Humatic community under the jurisdiction of the Humatic Mayor's Office. It is this community for many decades that has preserved the rich history, traditions, culture, and the rich historical name of a Chamorro man, Francisco Canata Sanchez. The people of Humatic understand the significance of preserving what F.Q. Sanchez means, not only to their village community, but importantly to the island community. I humbly ask my colleagues to support and appreciate the request. And I also like to request that Senator Frank Ogden be added as a co-sponsor. Thank you for the request. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
On the motion to place Senator Uggan as the second co-sponsor, there being no objection, so ordered. On the Bill 5, Senator Uggan, you're recognized. Any other senator after Senator Uggan? Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much to the sponsor of the legislation, Senator Morrison, for the opportunity to co-sponsor the proposal. You know, Mr. Speaker, several years ago, obviously, it became a somewhat contentious just about a year and a half ago with regards to the use of this facility. And in retrospect, we always ask the question, is taking this structure or shutting this structure down, did it in fact realize some savings for the community? And not only for the Department of Education, but for the entire island community. And I think that that's still subject to interpretation. But when you listen very intently to the sponsor of the proposal, Mr. Speaker, in this case, this facility should not have been left somewhat dormant over the course of the last year and a half. If you listen to some of the testimonies that were provided during the course of the public hearing, there were concerns about the entire structure being dilapidated. There were concerns about some mold building up and mildew building up in different portions of the structure. And that said something in terms of what needed to be done to be able to get this building back into appropriate use. And the good sponsor had identified it. He reached out to his mayor, and we appreciate the attendance of the mayor and some of the village representatives that showed up during the course of the public hearing, because they highlighted some of these concerns. But what caught me and what really intrigued me about the overall presentation, Mr. Speaker, was what the community collectively had shared with Senator Morrison and had shared with members of the committee that were there during the public hearing, that they had a plan of action of how to appropriately use this facility. One question that was indirectly posed was, you have the mayor's office located right across the street. If in fact you use this for the mayor's office facilities, what are you going to use that structure for? And the immediate response was, we're going to use that for our community center, for our youth center, so that we can allow the youth to be able to congregate there and the entire community to be able to utilize that facility right now that is presently the mayor's office. So regardless as to what the eventual use is, Mr. Speaker, I was fairly impressed that the community had gotten together of Humatic and had identified the eventual use. If in fact this facility, by virtue of the sponsor, Senator Morrison's legislation, is given back, whether it be administratively or in other forms, back to the community of Humatic through the mayor's office, and allow the mayor to use it. There were several purposes that were outlined during the course of the entire public hearing that I think our people of Guam and the people of Humatic would be very proud of. And let me just close by saying this, that not only did the people of Humatic say that in fact they wanted to convert the use of this facility for community benefits in Humatic itself, but they also said, and one of the things that also reached out to the rest of the community, is that ultimately it would benefit the entire island community by virtue of not only using the facility, but also allowing other people or allowing residents from other villages to be able to come into Umatak or Umatak and be able to use that facility. And that says a lot about the people of the village, Mr. Speaker, is first and foremost, they recognize the opportunity to be able to acquire this facility. They took the steps necessary to reach out to the senator that hails from that beautiful village from the south. And legislation was not only introduced, but they also formulated their eventual course of action in terms of how they would eventually, should it be passed, this legislation be passed, eventually benefit the people of Amatak and then ultimately extend itself to benefiting the entire island community. So, Mr. Speaker, I commend the sponsor for introducing this measure and acting on it as quickly as possible. I commend the oversight chair also for expediting the public hearing, and I commend the mayor of Umatak as well as the representatives there in terms of them reaching out and providing their testimony, and I certainly stand in full support of this proposal. Let me just finally, Mr. Speaker, when the Guam Preservation Trust representative was there, because this, I understand, is one of the historical landmarks that has been identified under their program. One of the statements that was made is that they want to continue to partner with the mayor's office should this legislation go through and ensure that they're still able to utilize some of those funds to continue the preservation and the eventual full utilization of this facility. So I think that that also bodes well in terms of assuring the people of Amatak, the mayor of Umatak, and then also the entire island community that not only is this facility going to be transferred to the mayor's office for the community use and benefit, but it's going to transfer to the mayor's office for the entire island's benefit and then ultimately continue to be preserved as a historical landmark by the Guam Preservation Trust. So I close with that remark, and I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I stand in full support of this proposal.
Thank you very much, Senator Hagan. Any other senator wish to be heard? Senator Rodriguez, Senator Aileen Yamashita, and then Senator Duenas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in full support of Bill number 5-32, and I commend the author for moving this legislation forward. As you know, Mr. Speaker, closing down F.Q. Sanchez Elementary School in Umatak a few years ago was wrong. It was a mistake. And there was an opportunity to right that wrong, and we've passed up on that opportunity. And so now we have legislation before us that gives us again that opportunity to make that wrong right. And so I fully support this legislation. This legislation, Mr. Speaker, would allow the people of Umatak the opportunity to once again take advantage of the use of this facility that is a historic building, and also it's also not just good for that community, but also be good for the entire community. And so I ask my colleagues to join Senator Morrison and Senator Uggan to pass this legislation and give back this building to the people of Umatak. Stu Masi. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Rodriguez. Senator Yamashita.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to stand in full support of Bill number 5-32. Who, Mr. Speaker, could ever forget what we all went through during the discussion of merging? We didn't shut down F.Q. Sanchez. We merged the student population and the teaching community of F.Q. Sanchez Elementary with the community of Molessa Martyrs. It became one whole school. There were many reasons to do that, and that debate and those arguments were very emotionally driven, and it was also focused upon what was in the best interest of teaching and learning. And so after all of the emotion and after all the arguments were made, the decision was made to merge the two school communities. Once that decision was made then, therefore, the governor, Governor Calvo, moved and had an MOA drawn up, so that the mayor's office could have full use of F.Q. Sanchez. I support this measure by Senator Morrison because I think anything that is statute rooted gives it strength. I do think that everything that he describes as possible has been reflected in that MOA. So that strength is rooted once this passes into law. And so, Mr. Speaker, as the emotions again are going to be kicked up, I ask that we remember why we did this. I think every time we turn around, we're being told about how there's no money. Well, there's money, then there's no money, but I think there's really no money. And so it's how do we do the best for our communities with the small buckets of money that we do have. And so in working with the Department of Education, we supported what the Board of Education had asked that we do. But I believe that the transferring of rooting this facility under the Amatic Mayor's office is a good thing, and I wish them the best of luck as they proceed in deciding if it's going to become a charter school or if it's going to be a recreation center or a senior citizen center or a healthcare facility. And we have always said that FQ Sanchez always welcomes and is open for the whole island and for our visitors. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I stand in full support of Bill number 5-32. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Yamashita. Senator Duenas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to rise in full support of Bill 5-32. You know, Mr. Speaker, when I was fortunate during the 2010 election to receive enough votes and the honor to serve in this body, during the course of that term in the 31st Guam Legislature, there were many phone calls that I took from constituents and friends that had very passionate dialogue attached to them with how they felt things were moving forward on Guam, particularly when it came to legislation or executive decisions and the like. But one call that stands out in my mind was a call from now Senator Tommy Morrison and his passionate plea to reconsider my position on the issue with regard to FQ Sanchez and the disposition at that time and the decisions that were being made as a result, of course, of the Evergreen Report and we all know the rest is history with regard to that. But it is then that I knew how much this particular friend of mine, we were acquaintances at the time, we've become much better friends nowadays, but it was then that I knew his real passion and desire, not only for his village, but for the entire island of Guam. And so I can certainly see why this was one of the first actions that he has taken in this body to ensure that he follows through on something that he was very passionate about, Madam Speaker. I also remember, Madam Speaker, the recent coverage and the recent state funeral that we held for the former and now late Mayor Sanchez. And I remember his brother who gave a very eloquent eulogy about his brother's time in service. And remembering that the service that he gave to his people of Umatic in particular took the front of what he did a lot of times, even to his own health and perhaps even some of his family obligations, in so much as that's how much he cared about the village. I remember during one of the times when the discussion was being had on what to do with the property, then that mayor saying, "Give me the keys." And of course we know that that didn't happen, and here we are now today. In discussions with the current mayor and in discussions, Madam Speaker, with the good senator, sponsor of this bill, Senator Morrison, it is clear that the intent is righteous to use the facility as a community gathering place, to perhaps use the center as for an immersion program under charter school capabilities for our Chamorro language, to use the facility for anything that really will give honor and dignity to the value and the historical value that that particular piece of property holds. And I cannot think of a better place and a better keeper of that facility than the mayor. In closing, Madam Speaker, I will say this in the structure of the legislation. We ask the mayors to do a lot. And Government-wide, we know of the resource constraints. We know that times are tough. And as much as we ask, it's tough to fund these things a lot of times. This bill gives an opportunity for the mayor to exercise prudence in saying there is a cost to running this facility, a fund that's set up for them to be able to fund the maintenance so that perhaps they don't have to come back to the general fund and ask us to be self-supportive. So I just see so many components of this bill that make sense, Madam Speaker. But more than anything else, once again, that stands out in my mind is, as the good author of the bill said during his testimony, this is most certainly the right thing to do. And the end of the bill says, in case somehow we got it wrong, that building and that structure and that land will go back to the Chamorro Land Trust where it would be rightly and duly belonging. So, Madam Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to rise in full support of Bill 5 and ask that our colleagues also join. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, are there any other speakers? There being none, Senator Morrison, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank my colleagues for their input. I especially also want to thank the chairman, Pangilinan, for helping move this Bill 5 forward. And Madam Speaker, I know there was many efforts by many members in this body to keep FQ Sanchez open, but here we are today, and I know with this measure going forward that we will be proud in the future to one day drive by that school and see activity there with kids out there playing again, and history, traditions, and culture restored again. So with that, Madam Speaker, I want to thank my colleagues again for their support, and I also like to make an amendment to include Senator Dennis Rodriguez, Senator Yamashita, and Senator Cristoenis as co-sponsors of the bill.
On the amendment to add those individuals, Rodriguez, Yamashita, and Dueñas as co-sponsors, no objections, so ordered. And on the motion then to send Bill 5-32 to the third reading file without any objections. It's Bill 5, right? Amendment, make sure. Yes, no objections, so ordered. We're now on Bill number 4-32 LS. Senator Morrison, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, before we left off, I was requesting that I motion to place bill as substituted by the committee to the third reading file and further substituted on the floor.
So as substituted then by the Committee on
Yes.
General Governmental Operations and Cultural Affairs, that's what we're working on.
Yes, that's correct.
So do you have one? I'm looking, I only have, wait, 1 second. Okay. It's okay. And further substitute on the floor. Okay, Senator, you may proceed. You are going to speak on the bill.
Yes, Madam Speaker, thank you. The need for technology is temporary, and we cannot have Guam's efforts to make full use of the technology subject to the inclination of who, again, happens to be governor. An Office of Technology must be a permanent part of the Guam operations and must have statutory authority to ensure that our government uses technology to improve the employee's efficiency and employee productivity. We must use technology for better service for our residents and businesses. We must use technology to gain immediate access to information in order to make timely and informed decisions. In order to do this, Madam Speaker, we must modernize our IT infrastructure and have a coordinated approach to use of information technology in all departments and agencies. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me this time.
On the motion, Senator Duenas, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, thank you once again for the opportunity to rise at this point in support, full support of Bill 432 LS as substituted on the Committee on General Governmental Operations and Cultural Affairs and as further substituted on the floor. Madam Speaker, in the last discussion, as we left off on this bill, I know that a number of members of this body had concerns, and I commend the author for taking those into consideration and working diligently with the time allotted between the last session and now to make substantive changes to this particular bill. Madam Speaker, this bill has a lot of potential and has the potential to really transform the way that the government is currently doing business in the wake of the technological explosion of the last several decades, but in particular the last several years. There are currently businesses, Madam Speaker, that have been put together just on the basis of compiling information and establishing web-based information that have particular inroads to government operations that are opportunities to generate revenue. Several years ago, as part of the Camacho administration, many directors got together from Bureau of Statistics and Plans, Land Management, Revenue and Taxation, and really saw the opportunity that existed. And then Senator Morrison as well, working with Bureau of Information Technology and others, and then eventually going over to Stats and Plans, understanding the wealth of opportunity that exists in the future for the government to secure resources of its vast information and databases that exist. This is not to mention, Madam Speaker, the attention to detail that needs to be paid when it comes to the government following and keeping pace with the private sector in bringing all of our government agencies up to speed with regard to their use of technology so that they become more efficient in this new world. And so, Madam Speaker, there are times, and I understand when there are debates and dilemmas over what the government does and more government this and more government that and what does it mean. But I think in this instance in particular, Madam Speaker, you have a function that could easily be handled under the umbrella organization of perhaps DOA or the like, but the institution itself being somewhat insulated and being able to operate to really move forward, put together agreements, generate revenue to self-support itself, and to ensure that the government now has the first crack and the opportunity to protect its data, to protect its database moving forward, perhaps public-private partnerships, but to ensure that that valuable data and something that the government owns, and governments throughout the United States are doing this. If you want to go into land management a lot of times, or bureaus within the states, if you're going to download information for them, a lot of times you have to pay a fee. It's nominal at that, maybe $1 or $1.50, but to access that base, a lot of times for purposes of detailed information, you have to swipe your card. So the bottom line is there's huge potential here, Madam Speaker. I really see no negative when it comes to costing the government more, and I see very much so the positive of ensuring that a bureau itself, hopefully insulated, is able to really put this government on track, support itself through revenue generation of charging for its services, and being able to help our island overall, especially when we talk about potential investment for the future and economic potential and opportunity. So, Madam Speaker, I'd like to commend the author and hope that this bill will see positive and favorable results. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator Duenas. On the motion, Senator Yamashita, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for allowing me the opportunity to speak on Bill number 4-32. Madam Speaker, overall, I support the notion of putting together a bureau that would help leverage resources, use resources smarter and wiser. And I do have a question for the author, if he will yield, and the question is this, Madam Speaker. Understanding that this is going to bring together an umbrella, so to speak, to ensure that our technology is consolidated and leveraged and is smart, how will this impact, Madam Speaker, the personnel of different agencies? For example, last week I had the pleasure of meeting with Mr. Cameron, who oversees public libraries, and a couple of the librarians, or librarian techs, the two people who oversee our library services. And in our effort in our committee, of course we want to support. As you know, we just celebrated a private-public partnership that energized our satellite libraries, and they're all up and running, and that's a very good thing. But the concern that they raised with me last week was the person that was at the public library as an IT person, informational technician, had been reassigned to the beginnings of the Bureau. And in speaking with the author during a break, I asked if that was indeed the intent, that all agencies would not have an IT on the ground, but that they would be found in a central place, and then as needed you call. And the concern with that, and that might be a good idea, but the concern with that, and particularly for our public libraries, Madam Speaker, is we know there's a lot of technology that is used by the public, by the people who walk in. And so the ladies last week made their case, Ms. Terry and Ms. Sandy, that they always need an IT person throughout the libraries at all times to help them when the platforms go down or something arises, so that they don't have to call and make this appointment as they have to do now. So perhaps if the author will help me understand or let us know that this doesn't say you're going to strip staffing patterns of all ITs in the executive branch, or that at least we could put in consideration to say that our public library could have an IT person as a part of their branch, so that their service will be as effective or as efficient as possible. I'm hoping that my question seems reasonable and is logical, but that is, the library needs an information person within their business at all times, and will this structure, will Bill number 4-32 make it more difficult for them to get that kind of support as needed? I don't want to see them having to make a phone call or fill out a form when we have families walking in or students walking in or the public walking in and expecting that they'd be able to go to a library and access the technology, only to find out that the system is down and they won't be able to.
Senator Morrison, do you yield to the question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To answer the good Senator Yamashita's question, could be found on page 9, on line 5, with respect to executive agencies, that the Chief Technology Officer may, and then on item 4, draw upon staff and other agencies for advice and assistance in the formulation and implementation of administrative and operational plans and policies. And also on 5, he also can recommend to the governor transfers of equipment and human resources from any executive agency and most effective, efficient uses of fiscal resources of executive agencies to consolidate or centralize information processing operations. Madam Speaker, it's there, it may, but how I view this, as well as just like experience in the Bureau of Planning and Statistics, it is the centralized planning, per se, division of the line agencies. And over time we evolved where many planning divisions exist now in respective agencies with chief planners, planner 3s, planners 4s. What this office is eventually going to do is similar to what the Bureau of Planning does, is facilitate the process of IT and the proper investment into IT. I believe you'll make the processes for the library in this case a lot more efficient, and in the case of need, more better shared resources to support, in this case, the library. So in that respect, I don't believe it will directly impact the library of their IT staff. Actually, I believe it will allow for better efficiencies to help provide more shared resources, and that communication, as far as communication, that we're all speaking the same language as far as investment in IT. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Yamashita, did he answer your question?
Well, yes, he did answer the question, and perhaps the way that I will ensure that the library, with your help, maybe we could further discuss this, is to discuss this outside of this particular bill. I understand, yes, that we want to be smarter about the programs, about the intelligence, and I totally support that. What I do want to make sure is that the public library has the staff that they need. And so I think when we go through their budget, then we can see and make sure that they do have an IT person on board, and that, or whomever it was, is returned, or at least the position is returned. I think that's what happened. When the person was transferred out, the position was transferred out, and they've been left without anybody. So, Madam Speaker, thank you very much for the floor. Thank you, Senator.
On the motion, Senator Rodriguez? Oh, you're not going to speak on the motion. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on the motion? Speaker Pangilinan, yes, on the bill.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I certainly believe in what we're trying to accomplish with what is being outlined in the bill with regards to coordinating and trying to ensure that we actually work cohesively in the presentation, acquisition, coordination of systems and processes for technology implementation within the government of Guam. I'm just not sure that we need to set up another structure to do that in statute, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the way I look at what is being proposed in here, I look at this as adding another level of cost to the government of Guam. I believe that, as again I mentioned, we're now establishing an office, putting together staff, that even if we were to take, and the original, it will just go to show you that the original bill had people coming from the different departments and agencies and being placed in this. But we know from the most recent experience with the library that they still need some type of expertise to be hosted at the site of the department and agency for the operations of their system. So I see us increasing the costs to implement this within the government of Guam, and we're not providing any resource. Now, the argument can be, oh yes we are, because we're going to allow them to charge the departments and agencies. Well, my point exactly. These departments and agencies are now going to have to take money out of their budget to pay for the services that are being provided by this Central Office of Technology. So we're just going to increase that cost for operating the government in this, and maybe that's necessary, maybe it's not. But I think that the way that we look at this and it's structured, I believe that it's going to add additional cost, and I'm not sure that we are ready at this time to add that. The other concern, of course, Madam Speaker, that we have has been, is that the governor, by executive authority, can change anything really in terms of the decisions made by the departments and agencies with respect to the design and management of information systems and the purchase or lease of acquisition. We're supposed to put it in the Office of Technology and try to isolate and insulate the technology decisions that are being made by this Office of Technology, but we're allowing the governor to kind of change that and change it by executive order. Do we really want to do that? Might as well leave it as within the Department of Administration operating as it is, and just put the tasks clearer. What tasks do we want the data processing division to perform? Why do we need to create this whole additional bureaucracy within the process by statute for something that should be existing today? And so those are some of the concerns I have, Madam Speaker. The other concern I have is we have no control over how much this Bureau of Technology is going to charge these departments and agencies. We just say that they're allowed to charge. How much? Again, what I say, Madam Speaker, in discussion when we had earlier on this bill is, then the governor can just decide to tell this department and agency to charge this agency, $300,000. There's nothing that says that the fee has to be reasonable. There's nothing to say for planning purposes of how much the departments and agencies now have to budget for technology, for consulting services, because we're creating a consulting group within the government of Guam, basically, plus an implementation group within the government of Guam that we're going to charge the government of Guam to perform. And I think that, that to me looks like adding an additional bureaucracy and additional cost on top of what is currently occurring. And while we do need to coordinate and consolidate some of the activities that are being planned in here, I'm not sure that an additional layer of bureaucracy is going to be the most efficient and effective way to do so, with open-ended authority to charge for whatever fee they want, because there's no restrictions whatsoever, Madam Speakers. And so those are the concerns I have with the bill, but I certainly agree with the intent and the need to outline some of the processes in here that will provide efficiency and coordination within the government of Guam. Thank you, and Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. On the motion, are there any other speakers? Senator, excuse me, Senator San Nicolas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the sentiments of the prior speaker. We can always count on the good senator to be very prudent in the application of laws and their respective costs. I rise, however, Madam Speaker, in support of this bill, and I do so with a full understanding of its complexities and its challenges going forward. But I believe, Madam Speaker, that this bill is one of those steps that we're just going to need to take and grow and get better on as we review it and as we see how it develops. Because when we go throughout our government, we can see that technology is being adopted ad whim from various agencies. They go and they buy whatever it is that they need within their own respective agency. They procure technology that they need within their respective agency. And we have a very big problem in this government of things being able to communicate across the agencies of the government. And this lack of communication is a great disservice to our people. You go to one agency and you try to get something done, and they say, oh, you got to go to this other agency to get it done. And you stand in line and you say, can't you just call them up and have them do it? And they say, oh, no, our systems are different. You got to go down there. And so what happens is we put our people on the road, back in line, standing all over the place in all these different agencies because our technology has not been incorporated as a unified response to the needs of the community. And so we need to move in that direction. Is this a perfect way to do it? Of course not. But is this a way to do it? It absolutely is. And I believe that by passing this bill and prudently assessing it after its implementation, having oversight hearings on a regular basis, and doing our jobs as senators to look at it and make sure that it's accomplishing what it's supposed to, we can fine-tune it so that our people are getting better services and our people are getting the advantages of a uniform technology policy throughout our government. On the concern of issuing charges to agencies, that was an initial concern of mine as well, and I spoke to the author about it when the bill was originally drafted. And I believe that that has been effectively mitigated in various ways, but I most especially want to reference page 18, line 22, that reads voluntary assistance. Now, when an agency is going to seek help or seek to procure services that are related to technology, it's voluntary. And it reads that the Memorandum of Understanding may include fees and costs. And so this will provide for a venue for our government agencies to be able to go to a centralized resource and get the help that they need rather than trying to figure it out on their own and, you know, slapping the pieces together, trying to build a technology infrastructure with the very limited resources that they have right now. If you go to every single agency, you'll find that they have a real hard time not only getting the right technology people into their offices, but keeping them. And then when they do bring those technology people into their offices, they're building their technological infrastructure based on the knowledge of that individual. If the individual leaves, a new person comes in and everything has to start all over again. And also that individual might have some technological expertise that's different from another individual in another agency that further complicates the ability of our agencies to be able to work together and communicate on the technological side. So I believe that centralizing it, creating more uniformity, and being very diligent in not only our review of this legislation, but in our oversight over its activities and making sure that it's working properly. I think that this is the step in that direction, and I believe that this is going to continue to be a work in progress, but in order to make that progress, we first must pass this bill. So I rise in full support of it, Madam Speaker, and I look forward to my colleagues doing the same. Thank you.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, are there any other speakers? There being none, Senator Morrison, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the wisdom as well from Senator Pangilinan and understanding his sentiments about Bill 4. And importantly, you know, if these issues for the past 12 years in our investment in IT and how we can speak the same language across the executive agencies, procuring these IT services, then I wouldn't be bringing this bill to light. I appreciate the contributions offered by colleagues on Bill 4. IT advancements have been at the center of transformation of how the private sector operates and transform the efficiency, convenience, and effectiveness in which they serve their customers. Our government largely has missed out on that transformation due to the lack of a structured, coordinated approach to management of technology investments, with IT projects too often costing millions of dollars more than they should, taking years longer than necessary to deploy, and delivering technologies that are obsolete by the time they are completed. With the creation of the Office of Technology headed by a Chief Technology Officer, we will now have the statutory authority to develop and provide direction in the use of internet-based technologies to make it easier for our people and businesses to interact with our government, streamlining processes, and importantly, saving our taxpayers' dollars. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to make an amendment to include Senator Duenas and Senator Mike St. Nicholas as co-sponsors in this bill.
Senator, I'm going to, I'm trying to figure out to do this. One of the senators did raise his hand to speak, and I will still give you another opportunity as well. What I'll do, though, is I would act on your motion then to add a co-sponsor. And the name of the senator again, one more.
Senator Duenas and Senator Mike St. Nicholas.
Okay,
Michael St.
Duenas.
Nicholas.
Okay. So on that motion, then without any objections, so ordered.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, and I will give you another opportunity to close. Thank you. I will recognize then Senator Tom Adat on the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I too think that the bill certainly has very good intent in terms of what it's trying to accomplish. However, I do have some really serious concerns in just going through the bill. First of all, if we take a look at many of the things that this Bureau of Information Technology is being made responsible for, is going to be responsible for coordinating the development of, for example, your E911 system. It's going to be responsible for coordinating with the various agencies that has to do with the disaster recovery communication systems. It, it, it also is responsible for other similar type of activities. And the concern that I have is that then when we shift that responsibility to the Bureau of Information Technology, it really takes the pressure off, for example, the Guam Fire Department in continuing with its diligent effort to try and develop its request for proposals, to get out the request for proposals for development of the next generation 911 system. So that's the one concern that really gnaws at me, and that we essentially shift the responsibilities, and then it takes the pressure off of those agencies that are actually given the responsibility for ensuring that, for example, a 911 system is working properly, or that you have the Homeland Security and the National Guard are properly coordinated and are doing the necessary coordinations to ensure that we have effective recovery systems in place. The other concern that I have, of course, is that if we take a look at the funding for this particular entity, it is supposed to, in essence, charge, I guess basically, if one, it has the authority to be able to go out there and contract with, I guess, a private firm or whatever to conduct audits, or maybe even perform other technical work that it needs to have done. And then that work is actually then going to be charged back to the agency. And for me, it's kind of a, the old chicken or egg question. Unless he identifies all these requirements prior to the budget cycle, so that then he can deliver basically a pre-invoice to the department, how then is that department going to know how much to set aside for the services that the information technology officer is going to require? Because it clearly says in the bill that of course the agencies are to identify what these potential costs are, and then and budget for that. But then all these funds that then are taken in from the various agencies will go into a certain account, but that will have to be appropriated by the legislature during the regular budget cycle. So it's not clear to me how that is going to work. The third concern that I have is that it's really not clear, the organizational structure of this Office of Information Technology could morph from day to day. If we ask, well, can you show me the organizational structure of the information technology? It kind of depends on what are we doing this week or what are we doing next month. Because then whatever those plans are, then will determine, who he pulls from, what agency. So it's really almost kind of scary, because it could be, let's face it, it could be, oh, you're looking for an information type or a computer type guy? Here, I got just the guy for you. And this is the guy that they've probably been trying to get rid of. And so they're like, here, take him. And so it becomes a dumping ground. And that could certainly very well happen. I think it would give me a little bit more comfort if I saw a little bit more structure as to what this information technology office is going to be. But there really isn't. It's kind of like, well, whatever we're doing, and whatever it's going to take to support that activity, then that's the organizational structure that we'll have. So despite the fact that I think this is important because technology is moving very fast, I'm just concerned that it doesn't have enough structure to it to keep it from becoming really rather unwieldy. So I do have my concerns, and so I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Ada. Madam Speaker, I understand you wish to be heard. You're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This one's a little bit too tall for me, but can you guys reduce this a little bit? Even with heels, still high. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know since the last session I've been having some discussions with the author and some of the staff as well to try to wrap this around my head to have a better understanding of what the intent of this bill is. I was informed that the Bureau of Information Technology was created, so to speak, I guess, by the governor. It's not necessarily a bureau that exists by statute, and therefore it is that part of this bill then is to create actually and codify an office, establishing rather the Office of Technology. Now, I also have the same concern as previous speakers in terms of providing, of course, another bureaucracy or growing the government. But in this particular case, I know it is important that we do have an office in which, an Office of Technology, because that's we are in the age of technology, and that is important. And we need to keep up with the times, and we must make sure that at least there's some that everyone's speaking the same language when it comes to information system and technology, and of course having the right equipment in place in the government. All that, I understand and accept. There are, however, other concerns that I have with the bill, and I'm going to try to go through them if I may, and I'm going to ask the author if he could yield to some of my questions, and I'll do them one at a time and in a chronological order, so that then he'll be able to have the opportunity to read along with me, and also I may be able to provide amendments to some of the sections. So on page 5, on lines 10 to 12, that's the underscored items. Those are new, and this is the first time I've actually read this. And I know that when I was up there and I had recognized the author for the bill, and if you read the title where it says here that as substituted by the committee and further substituted in the floor, but a comment was made, the legal counsel has reviewed this, but only to find out that at least Therese Terlai has not read the bill until now. So she's going to have to go through that, of course, to make any technical corrections as necessary. So on lines 10 to 12, where it says that the governor may create and empanel an advisory council within the Office of Technology to provide guidance, expertise, and direction to. And I'm wondering is that, because if this is going to be an advisory council, then an advisory council is going to be created rather than, and that is this advisory council then going to provide direction, or is it just to provide guidance and expertise to the Chief Technology Office and the Office of Technology staff? So that's the very first question that I have.
Yield, Senator.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I understand it's a lot of work for one individual, and that's why many times boards, commissions are created, Senator. And of course, the governor may create a temporary advisory panel to help things move along properly, and that's why we inserted that section in there to ensure that this may be a lot of work for one individual. and to ensure that he has support from individuals that may have these expertise to assist in moving the office along. But again, we contemplated on this idea, but because we don't want this to be too bureaucratic as well, but at the same time, ensure that it assists with the load, if necessary, to impanel an advisory group.
Is that satisfactory, Madam Speaker?
Well, he just said something that kind of bothered me now because it's not in the language, and that's why I'm wondering whether it should be. I should amend it now because he was saying that the governor now may create and impanel a temporary advisory council, but that's not on the bill. So is it supposed to be temporary, or that's only because it was part of the explanation now that is confusing here, because the way it's written, it's not temporary, that there will be an advisory council when the governor creates it, or is it only going to be temporary? If it's going to be temporary, what is the time limitation here?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I may have slipped a line in there that was probably incorrect and inaccurate with the line here, but that was an option to make it also temporary in the case it was necessary for this operation or the Office of Technology, given that, again, this may be a little bit too much work for one individual. But certainly, Senator, if that's the case, we could insert language in there that can make it permanent.
I would prefer that, of course, and for me, that we don't use the term temporary unless that's the intent, and just leave the language as it is. So I just want the author then now to clarify that. Does he want it temporary, or just wants to leave the language as is?
Okay. How many more questions do you have?
Several
No,
more?
only because I know that a couple of senators have a lunch engagement, and I had already told Speaker Ben that we would vote on his bill before they all left.
Okay,
And
so I
so
do
I'm-
have yes, I do have about at least 6 maybe questions.
Okay, can we suspend discussion on this, take the vote so that we can send that bill down to the governor, and resume this discussion?
At 2 o'clock?
Yes.
Okay, no problem. So at 2 o'clock
Did
then.
Senator Rodriguez leave? Okay.
So-
Then
And maybe we can even resolve
Okay.
a lot of this
Uh,
during break time.
I'm going to recognize the Chairman of Rules to make the motion to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that we suspend discussion on this bill, and that that's the first motion, that we suspend discussion on this bill.
There being no objection, so ordered.
Now, my next motion, Mr. Speaker, is notwithstanding the House rules, I move that we revert back to motions.
Hearing no objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that we proceed to the voting file, again notwithstanding the House rules, and take up the vote on Bill 47-32, as well as the appointment of Mr. Victor Cruz, as requested by one of our colleagues.
Hearing no objection.
The legislature is back in session. We are on the voting file. So on So on the matter of vetoed bill number 9-32, notwithstanding the objections of the governor, I'm going to ask the clerk. Oh, so sorry. Okay. So then, yes, I stand corrected by the Vice Speaker. So on bill number 47-32.
Bill number 47-32 LS as introduced by VC Pangilinan. An act to add a new section 8103.1 to Article 1, Chapter 8, Title 4 of the Guam Code Annotated to comply with Internal Revenue Code requirements applicable to the Government of Guam Retirement Fund.
Roll call.
Senator Tom Adda. Senator Tony Adda. Senator Uggan. Vice Speaker Cruz. Senator Duenas. Senator Limtiaco. Senator McCready. Senator Morrison. Senator Tina Rose Munya Barnes. Senator Pangilinan. Senator Bishop. Senator Rodriguez. Senator Nicholas. Speaker Wampat. Senator Yamashita.
Bill number 47-32 LS received 14 yea votes and 1 excused absence. Bill number 47-32 is duly passed by this body. On the appointment of Mr. Victor F. Cruz to serve as a member of the Guam Land Use Commission. All in favor, please raise your hand. Mr. Victor F. Cruz is duly confirmed by this body. So we will recess until 2 this afternoon, and we would continue with bill number 4 with and the first person up will be the speaker with 10 questions. Okay, we are recessed.